Hi.
We're rolling.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi, good to see you.
How has playing Eddie changed you as an actor?
As an actor, I think it's changed me enormously. Like I was desperate to really challenge myself and do something, to sort of rise to the level of my ambition. And I thought this was an amazing opportunity to utilize everything that I know and require me to learn a bunch of things that I didn't know. And I was terrified, and I had thought that it was impossible as I started this journey, and I realized that's exactly where I need to be in the start of every job now. If I read a script and I go like, all right, I know exactly what to do with this, it's going out the window. I want to feel terrified and that there's no chance I can possibly pull this off, and I know that's the good starting point.
And you just mentioned you learned something that you didn't know. What was that?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things that was really terrifying about this was just going into the darkness of this. It seemed so impossibly dark. And, one of the things, and without taking too much time and getting sort of like too philosophical or psychological about it, but I learned the value of facing your fears and entering that cave, entering the dragon's cave, because you go in there and you realize that what I realized was that I was the dragon. Like, it was only me, my own limitations that I was afraid of. And, you come out of that with the sort of epiphany of, diminished fear.
Is there anything about Eddie that you learned during your research that, still pops into your mind today where you're like, oh, just...
He did a lot of very bizarre things. It was the things that I learned about him that were the most helpful and felt like the most kind of eureka moments actually were the relatable things, like understanding how he got off onto this path. I mean, Eddie certainly killed some people, and tragically, and sort of terrible crimes, but primarily he was a grave robber, and that started when his mother died, and he missed her so much that he couldn't live without her. So after she'd been dead for 2 years, he came to the graveyard and dig her up to bring her home, and that. Understanding that was the sort of his first sin, that was the original sin, that was his first crime, really. I don't want to humanize it. You have to be very careful about the language you use, because certainly my job was not to vilify him, and certainly not to absolve him of his crimes. It was to understand him, and I didn't want to humanize him to humanize a monster, but what we were trying to do was say that, what was it? What are the things? How in society do we create these people collectively? What are the sins of ours collectively? And there was a lot of stuff that felt really, really relevant. Our abdication of our responsibility to the mentally ill, isolation in society that's spiraling out of control, exposure to images that are very difficult and toxic for the human brain to process, abuse. All of these things were the catalysts for Ed to do what he did, and they all felt so relevant and so valuable for us to explore and say, like, listen, Ed is a really extreme case, but these are the consequences of these type of exposure to these type of narratives. And so it felt in that way, in the tradition of storytelling, actually really serving a function in society to reflect back of us. Like Picasso said, like, art is the lie that reveals the truth. We have to face these things in order, hopefully, not to perpetuate them. And so when, I think that sometimes Ryan within this franchise can be accused of glorifying these things, these darker parts of society. I think it's the absolute opposite. I think he's illuminating these things with the hope that we won't perpetuate them moving forward.
You're right, and I totally agree. Thank you.
Right on.